Today's guest is Rob Enders, co-founder and CEO at Niio Art, innovative digital art platform based in Israel. Hey Rob, nice to see you again. How are you?
Hey, David, it's great to be here. And yeah, good to see you again. I'm great. Thank you. Really good.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to founding the Niio Art? What was your aha moment?
Okay, so I've been involved in the tech scene here in Israel for the last 20. I've been working in a few different spaces, always where digital trends were just starting, where there was always going to be a need to educate the audience and develop products and solutions to support new market sectors. And I worked on a very interesting project around about 12, 13 years ago with a guy called Oren, who's actually my co-founder here at Niio. And we were speaking very much about the need for business to be really impactful. Once you've built a number of different businesses and been involved in a lot, it's not about the money, it's about something which is going to contribute positively to the world. And we waited for the right moment and the right opportunity. You fast forward a number of years, I was the CEO of a display technology company involved in bringing screens into our feeling very much that we were bringing a lot of noise, a lot of advertising, a lot of useless content, and just bombarding people with digital noise wherever they went. And at the same time, Oren was, he's one of the leading product experts in this country, but is also very strong in the art academy world. So he's been lecturing and established the faculty of interactive art and visual design. And we were speaking, and we were talking about the fact that students were creating artworks which were actually digital, yet there was no infrastructure, no ecosystem to support this. So you had a content sector which was hugely appreciated, but a number of challenges to actually make this easily accessible to the world. And when you think about the fact that art is really the underpinning of society and of culture, it actually keeps us sane. We started seeing an opportunity and started seeing, hang on, every other content sector has gone digital, books and TV and music, leading to companies like Spotify and Netflix. There was an opportunity here, and we went and validated that over a period of time. So that was really the genesis until we actually got into understanding what the core problems were and then obviously building out the solution.
Okay. So what problems are you solving now?
So I think there's different levels of explaining the problems. On the one side, you could look at the world as a whole. We're going through this world of very rapidly going digital towards Web3, a lot of confusion, coming out of a pandemic with a lot of people having had a tough time, a lot of mental illness in this world. If you ask me, too much bombarding of digital content in all directions. And so first of all, I think from humanity's perspective, the opportunity to have a moment during your day to stop, to reflect, to be inspired, to hear a story is something which actually humanity needs. So this is kind of the macro level in terms of the impact to the world. At the same time, we're solving problems for artists who we are connecting with a world ready to experience art digitally. Providing them with solutions for how their artworks are attributed to them, how they're safeguarded, how they're always available to be played as they expected, but also importantly, providing a whole variety of monetization options for artists so they can do what they enjoy doing, which is creating and telling stories through their art and actually earning in different creative ways. At the same time, for those people who are interested to discover and experience this type of art, we've created technology and product experiences which make it as easy as the way you consume a film or a TV or a book digitally at the click of a button on any device. So really, we're building out an ecosystem and empowering both sides to be able to enable this medium, which we think is going to be the most important art form of this generation, to be accessed and experienced and enjoyed by everyone.
Some people say Niio is a Netflix of digital art. Do you like that description? How does your business model work?
So, this is always a question as an entrepreneur. Do you want to be compared to someone else or do you want to have your own identity? And of course, I think it's a timing question. When you start going and you're working in a new sector, which people don't understand, that type of analogy helps people kind of conceptually get what you're trying to do. And I think in time, the brand comes by itself. And then hopefully in the future, Niio, people will create a company and say, we want to be the Niio of something else. But in principle, if you talk about films and books, and music, which have led to companies like Netflix and Spotify, a consumer platform which enables you to very easily access and experience a broad range of content which can suit different types of audiences, then of course this is similar to Niio in that we enable consumers to discover and experience all different types of digital art, from visually aesthetic art for people who are new to experiencing art to very deep, serious, conceptual, abstract art from hardcore artists who, art collectors enjoy philosophizing over and experiencing. So yes, we have that similarity. The one difference would be that art, unlike other content sectors, has both audiences that want to pay a monthly fee and experience on a subscription model like Spotify and Netflix, but there will always be people who want to own art. And therefore, on the Niio platform, not only can you subscribe, but you can also buy. And of course, we do that using NFT type of technology, which is, again, an enabler as opposed to the final solution.
It seems that you are so good at consummating international collaboration and partnership with the global brands. You told me about your partnership with Samsung and many other brands. So can you tell us a little bit about your partnership with Samsung, Hilton, other global brands now?
So, I think let's frame what it is we're doing, because ultimately we're building an ecosystem, and therefore in this ecosystem we want to bring many different types of entities. We had a vision, and we went to investors a few years ago, and we said three things. We said, number one, people will be experiencing digital art across all aspects of their lives. Where you live, where you work, where you explore, there will be screens and other digital canvases showing digital art. It will not replace physical art. It will be in addition. This is number one. Number two, we said that because artists tell the story of our world and use whatever tools they have to create and tell their story, it is no surprise that digital and digital art will become the most important art form of this generation. And the third thing we said is that people will buy JPEGs and GIFs in the form of digital art for over $1 million. We didn't know it would be NFTs. We knew it would be blockchain. So this was the context. And we said that the way that we would do this is by building an ecosystem which would bring together all those involved in creating the art, all different types of audiences who want to consume the art, whether that's business locations initially to showcase this experience, but then obviously all types of consumers. And within this ecosystem, we will bring additional partners which would make it easier for the consumers to actually access this content. So if you think that very often this is screen-based content, the ability to tie into your ecosystem a relationship with Samsung, the world's leading display manufacturer, and to optimize that you can experience Niio easily on any Samsung screen at the click of a button. And you can purchase Niio together with a Samsung screen to be delivered and installed anywhere in the world, starting with North America at the click of a button, was an important part of making this entire content sector accessible, because we believe digital art should be as easy as digital anything. So companies like Samsung and other hardware manufacturers make it easy for people who see this experience to actually experience it in their own space very, very easily. For other brands, what we are seeing is, first of all, brands are now being seen as the new patrons and supporters of the arts. If you take the hospitality industry, they're looking to inspire you with an experience. They're looking to associate their brand with the values that they represent. And very often, art is a very important way of designing their spaces and providing an experience for their guests. So in the likes of Hilton, for example, who have 22 brands, we will be bringing digital art into the public spaces and into the rooms uniquely. And for the first time ever, not only will you be able to experience art, which will be curated differently for different brands, but the technology we have will enable the hotel visitors to actually take that experience home with them. And that's going to be really unique. So you'll be able to go into the hotel room and either be gifted a subscription, or you might even be gifted a Hilton NFT created by Niio, which would comprise of some digital art that you own together with a Niio subscription and some benefits to Hilton. So we look at these business partners as a means by which we make digital art easy to access. And also we enable the customers and the community of our partners the opportunity to have a new experience that they've never maybe had the chance to experience.
Yes, we see a lot of development and rising momentum for the digital art NFT in the market. In fact, I interviewed the chairman of Animoca brand, who is short of a sandbox. So I have a little bit of understanding what is happening in NFT digital art world. But I can feel that Niio Art leading the market in different way, focused more on the experience. At the end of the day, is art. We get the most benefit, and we feel happy when we experience something rather than owning something, right? So it's great. And tell us to what extent is digital disrupting the art market going forward.
So, we've seen a similar trend in other sectors before. First of all, digital tools and technology is used for people to discover and potentially buy something physical. This was the same with
Yes.
music at the beginning. If you remember, technology enabled you to buy a CD. But then the shift was, to what extent is the content itself created digitally and experienced digitally? So if you look at the art world, which has been a very unique and a very complex system. This is a $70 billion market with the gallery infrastructure, the auction houses, almost a closed garden. Not everyone is accepted into the art club, into the art world. And for the last 10, 15 years, you've started seeing digital technology come in to almost rattle and shake the ground underneath the traditional establishment. And very often at the beginning, it was denied entry. People were pushing back. But the power over the last, especially since the pandemic, has seen digital technology really become the way forward, whether this was online viewing rooms. But now, again, if artists are telling the story of our world, which is digital, and artists have access to all types of digital tools, it's no surprise that it's this medium of digital art which will represent this generation. The challenge that there was that it was complicated. How do I find it? How do I look after the digital art to make sure in 20, 50, 100 years' time I can play it? So you're talking about managing files. For people getting involved with NFTs, it was only the techie guys at the beginning who know how to use a crypto wallet. So first of all, art is going through that digital transformation aggressively right now, and it's shaking the traditional establishment. I do not think it will replace. I think it will evolve. But what is critical is having a complete end-to-end holistic technology system and infrastructure, which is underpinned by true values of supporting the art world, which makes it easy for anyone to access, to discover, and to experience, whether they are buying or subscribing at the click of a button. So you have to really go end to end. And it's that type of solution which will only increase the speed by which the art world is going digital. And as long as the core values are there, it will bring all of the art world entities with it.
Fixed cost is a huge risk for startup, especially when business slow down, right? Going through the economy slowdown, global economy slowdown, I recently read so many news that some of the startup, very successful startup valuation plunge. For example, one of the fintech in Europe, they used to be valued at decacorn company, but they plunged 85% in just 1 year. And then, as we can imagine, they went through the very, very massive layoff. So it is quite natural. Business of a startup goes through the up and down of business growth cycle, and fixed HR cost of a full-time employee may be one of the biggest risks for a startup to manage, right? So let me ask a question. In terms of talent acquisition, management of HR cost structure, what is your strategy? Do you think meaning the large portion of full-time employee are still effective strategy, or do you think you can complement the conventional strategy by borrowing, even renting of external talents? Is a good idea for startup growing business. What is your thought?
So I think you're absolutely correct that usually anywhere up to 80% of the company's costs can be on the team. I think I'd answer the question a different way. I think first and foremost, the success of your company is going to be your team, and I can tell you that at Niio we have a strong group of full-time employees, and we also have external partners, either because we're working on certain projects for a period of time, or because they're specialists, or because here in Tel Aviv it became extremely difficult to recruit talent. A lot of the very big companies, the Amazons and the Facebooks, were basically in recruiting so many people at such high salaries. It was challenging, and if you want to develop something in a certain period of time, you cannot wait to find people. So certainly outsourcing is important. And yes, from a business perspective, this is a variable cost which enables you to manage. But I think what's the key message here is that, and in particular when you have a downturn, it is the passion and the commitment of your team. And it doesn't matter if they are full-time employees or if they are external people. I'm thrilled that the relationship we have with external consultants is very much that they feel part of the team. So it might be that the structure and the invoicing is different. However, given the fact that the design, the vision of the company is built on achieving something that we all believe in. That sense of commitment and passion is something which is equally felt amongst our full-time employees as it is the external team. And I think that's the key to success, and that's also the key to managing the challenges in the market. Because there are times when you've had to sometimes reduce people's salaries or look at other creative solutions, reduce the amount of time they're working, and to keep that motivation is critical. And the only way you can do that is by your values, the way that you treat people, and your purpose, that they know they're here to do something special.
Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the fundraising. I think fundraising one of the biggest challenges for the entrepreneur, right? So based on my background is finance. My entire career life, I have been involved in the finance investment activity. And my personal impression is that the entrepreneur I have encountered, I have met with, they're just too focused on meeting with more investor, new investor, and they're ready to jump in the sales pitch without much strategy about the fit with the specific investor. What do you think? Do you have any lesson learned or advice to share with the young entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult one. I think, first of all, there's a question which is interesting. If you're a good entrepreneur, should you be a strong fundraiser or should you be a strong company builder? Because sometimes they're different skill sets. I personally have had, experience in raising capital. It's not something I enjoy doing. I enjoy building a company, and that's where I think we should be focusing. When you're focused, therefore, on building a company, what you realize over time is that the investors you have is critical. And, they can either be a weight which pulls you backwards, or they can be something which propels you forward. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, I think you're absolutely correct. At the very beginning, when they need their first $1 million, they'll go to anyone they can, as opposed to actually taking an appropriate strategy. We as a company have always mapped out the different types of investors that we think would be a best fit for us. We work with both traditional financial venture capitalists, who are present and strong in our most important markets, but we also believe, because of the nature of our business, that having influential strategic investors from the art world is important. Board members of the MoMA and the Guggenheim gives us credibility and insight, and also strategic investors that can help take the business forward, whether that's geographically or in a particular sector. So, you and I met in Korea. We spent 3 or 4 days meeting with local investors because, we have a strong desire to be successful in the Asian markets. We see Korea as a cultural trendsetter for Asia, and therefore having investors that can support, bringing the company into those areas is very important. And the final thing, I think, is the mindset of the investors. I was once told a story about, the $1 billion overnight success that only took 10 years. It is very, very rare that startups just take off and they go from zero to $1 billion. We can always find the exceptions and the examples, but usually it's a journey. And, that journey for a lot of the most successful companies can be up to 10 years, even though it sounds less sexy than they write about in the press. And so, you want to have investors who see the long-term vision. For some businesses, you can start making money in the first 6 to 12 months. And I do believe that business, sometimes we've lost track of business, and every business has to have core business sense. You buy something for $1, you sell it for $2. There has to be business. It's not just, we'll make money in the future. But even if you have a very strong business focus, sometimes when you're in certain sectors, it takes time. And so you need to make sure you have investors that see your vision, they believe in your purpose, and they're there for the long term. So selecting the right ones is absolutely critical if you have that chance, obviously.
Okay, this is my favorite part. Let's move into a fire questions. I'll ask a question. You can tell me your immediate thought for less than 6 seconds per question or whatever.
Less than 6 seconds.
60 seconds, sorry.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Okay.
What is your favorite book and why?
I like From Good to Great by Jim Collins, which is a great reference for how great companies. What was the key recipe? And having the right people, purpose, values, big goals. I think it's a perfect recipe that many companies just don't look at. And yeah, I think from a business perspective, the other one I would actually say is the book on NLP for business, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which is a skill set in how you work with people. And I think when you take some of the business ethics or business concepts and you put those with people concepts, then you have a winning recipe.
Yes, I also read that book, Good to Great. It's a interesting, very simple idea, but they discover, but it is a new way to define the real leadership, right? Business
Yeah.
leadership. Yeah. Okay, so the second question, what is one thing you want to change most in startup ecosystem?
I definitely feel that with the traditional venture capitalists, too many of them have not been entrepreneurs. Business is people. Entrepreneurs are brave individuals who go on a journey. Sometimes they have more or less experience. And I definitely feel that too often you go to venture capitalists and they're either have not had business experience, or they've come out of business school, but they haven't come out of life school. And I think that in principle, most VCs will write on their websites to support entrepreneurs. I think that can be influenced, and I also think that there could probably be more support amongst CEOs and entrepreneurs to each other. I was once a member of a group called the Academy of Chief Executives in the UK, which was a fantastic resource because it's a lonely journey when you're running these companies and you're dealing with all of the challenges, but an exciting one. And it really helps when you have the support from others. So more support from VCs who actually can emphasize with what it is to be an entrepreneur, and more support amongst these CEOs themselves to help people along their journeys.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I agree that venture capitalers, still a lot of venture capital, they check the criteria on the checklist, and they're looking for the same thing.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So my final question is, this is a little bit tough question, personal. Who is the nicest person you have ever met, and why, except for your family member? Don't tell me your wife or father and mother.
So, it's interesting. You asked, the first person that comes to my mind is a guy called Bernard Lim. Bernard was actually originally from Malaysia. He's been a very successful C-level executive in the medical industry actually for many years. Bringing medical devices to the world, and an expert CEO, operational guy, but one of the most humble, nicest people I know. And he used to coin phrases to me like, "Don't confuse niceness with," very, very smart, very sharp, very people orientated, no sense of hierarchy. I remember there was a story once when someone came into his office and didn't know that he was the CEO and he was making tea for people. But it was this value, it was this focus, someone who is totally committed to impact related business, who, yes, can is an expert at all the traditional business checklists, from finance to operations, but at his core is a person, and I like that phrase again, don't confuse niceness with weakness. And when it comes to be honest and not brutal. So, this is it. He was the chairman of a company that I was the CEO. I learned a lot. As you get older, you realize how little we don't know. And whenever you'd spend time with Bernard, I realized how little I didn't know. And, it was a wonderful opportunity to work with him. We're still very close.
Okay, let's finish it today with the big pictures. What is next 5 years for you, and vision for the Niio? And what do you expect for the digital art ecosystem in 5 years?
So, I think that if right now today people hear about digital art and still some people say, what is that? I think in the next 5 years, there'll be millions of people around the world who are experiencing digital art in their space, who have a relationship with different types of artists that they like, or different styles that they are, that it will become part of their day-to-day lives. In their homes, their televisions, when they're not being used, will be a place of these big black holes on the wall. Their screens will become digital canvases, which will influence how they feel. I think from Niio's perspective, I would imagine that I would imagine that we will have in 5 years' time, around 10 million people around the world who are discovering and experiencing digital art. That will be paying millions of dollars to artists, which is a really exciting prospect. And the Niio brand will become a lifestyle brand that, I hope, like your earlier question, how do you feel about being called the Netflix of? I hope in the next 5 years that there'll be plenty of companies that in their decks, they'll be saying, we are the Niio of. So a cultural brand, supporting millions of artists or hundreds of thousands of artists with new revenue streams, and inspiring millions of people around the world. And I think the final piece is that, Niio is very much a global play. Art tells a story of the world. And so I think the fact that Niio's users will be across multiple continents excites me greatly. The idea that people in Europe can experience Asian art at the click of a button, and people in the Middle East can be experiencing, in America, and this global dynamic which overcomes borders, it overcomes religions and politics and diversity is a really exciting thing. So 10 million users, millions of dollars to artists, and people being inspired every day.
Yeah, very good. Very nice to catch up with you today. And thank you so much for time to share your story, personal story, and vision of Niio Art on my podcast. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, David, and I hope that we get to get together again next time in your career.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you very much.